5 times 15 for the opportunity to give hopefully a relatively brief talk. Jack's going to do the screen sharing for me because I passed the age of 30 a couple of years back and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'd like to tell a story in 12 minutes. And it starts, as the book does, with the Big Bang. Now, the core of this book is about astropolitics, which I'll come to, but I thought I'm not going to miss the opportunity to sort of gaze into the distance and stroke my beard and sort of talk meaningfully, because I just couldn't resist it, because it is actually part of the story. Looking up at the sky. It's what we've always done from the moment we were sentient. And we've looked up, and of course there wasn't the light pollution. We've looked up and we've asked ourselves questions. And we used to see that. And when you look at it long enough without light pollution, you start noticing things and patterns. I think we're programmed to see patterns. But of course, we also ask the question, why? And from a very, very long time ago, we used the sky as some of our answers. And those flickering lights, they told so many stories to us. They were wrong, most of them, but they are part and parcel of what we are now. The Finns, for example, in Finland, what we call the Northern Lights, they call foxfires, because their explanation for what was going on was that there was a giant fox and it used its giant tail and it swept the snow up into the air, into the sky, and that's what they were. They were foxfires. And in some parts of Africa, people said that at nighttime, the sun had gone behind this curtain, and the stars, they thought that these were holes in this curtain, that the light was coming through. And this is entirely explicable, normal things to think. But then comes science from a very long way back. You could say as much as 30,000 years back, when we started noticing patterns and we started tracking things and trying to see where are we and what is going on and why. And you can take it to 30,000 years ago, you can take it to 12,000 years ago, because at that point we stopped being hunter-gatherers. And if you're fixed in one place, it helps to have a look at the sky and work out when you're going to plant your seeds and harvest. You can fast forward onto the Babylonians, the Egyptians, who were working off a 10-day week, I think it's worth pointing out. So I'm very glad that science worked out. This is the Hebrews we can thank for a weekend. They worked out the 7-day week, because if God said he wanted to rest on the 7th day, we could have one as well. The Greeks, probably the greatest fast forward launching of science onto Islam's golden age. And then we get to the Enlightenment and another acceleration. And then to get where we are now, I'd like to introduce you to another man, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. This is a Russian guy who left school at 14, uneducated, self-educated, I should say. And several years before Kitty Hawk, the first plane that flew, took off, he was drawing airlocks for spaceships to dock, space suits to live in outside of spaceships. He was working out solar panels in space. And he's the guy that worked out escape velocity. And escape velocity is the relationship that changes between the rocket that's going up and its mass as it sheds part of the rocket, and the amount of fuel you need and the speed required to escape. And without him, none of the rest would have happened. And he's an unknown figure, except in Russia, I think. And he should be better known. And then we move into the 20th century, and that's when things really start to get going, because in the 20th century, we send a machine up for the first time. The Germans, as they were testing the V2 rocket, were the first ones to break the atmosphere. And then we began to orbit as well. And I thought it was also interesting that one of the things I came across in writing the book was the countdown, because the Americans use this very dramatic 10, 9, 8, and it's great, and it's what we're completely used to. And then I found out that the Russians just said, what time is it? And pressed a button and said, let's go. There was no countdown. And the reason is, if we go to the next frame, was that von Braun, who was the German rocket scientist who did the V2 rockets, and the Americans then got hold of him and took him to America. where he ended up on the Disney Channel, but that's another story. He'd been to see a film in the 1920s, a silent movie by Fritz Lang. Now, most of us know Metropolis. There's another one, Frau im Mond, of the Woman in the Moon. And to heighten the dramatic effect, he did the countdown, and hopefully, as you can see from this clip. So I think we can agree it's better with a countdown, isn't it? And it was very dramatic, but to this day, the Russians don't really do that. So here we are now with astropolitics. We've got up, we're out, we've got the satellites, we've been to the moon, we're going back to the moon. So this is the core of the book. And I try to explain space through geography. Now, in geopolitics, you take distance, volume of trade, rivers, mountains, what you can do and what you can't do. And you use it as the bedrock to understand a country and to understand international relations and what are the possibilities of a country. So I took that template and used it with space, because space has strategic corridors that you want. It's got places that you don't want, the Van Allen radiation belts, for example. There are parts of the moon which are far more valuable, because that's where the water is, the South Pole, for example. There's lots of rare earth materials there's on the moon. There's silicon, lithium, etc., titanium. So those are the bits that you want, and those are the bits you don't want. So I use that geography to explain what's going on. If we look at this map of space, a fairly rough one, you can see low Earth orbit, for example. Now that's a really useful bit of real estate. It's so important now that that's where all our satellites are, that you can't afford not to be there. It's important for military, it's important for commerce. And you have to be there if you're a major player. Geosynchronous orbit, this is where your machine will turn at the same speed as the Earth. And so consequently, you're over the same spot all the time. Very, very useful. And this leads me to the next slide, which is the negative side of things. And that's that I'm afraid we're taking all our problems that we have here up to space. And it mirrors what is happening here. What's happening here is there are blocks emerging in the world, the American-led bloc, China with Russia as a junior partner, and other blocks. And we're taking that a bit of space, and we don't have the laws to cope with this. There's a couple of treaties from the 60s and 70s, but they're 50, 60 years out of date. They don't have the technology in them for what is happening now. So, for example, now some of the satellites are used for early nuclear warning in case somebody's launched. But there's no law to say how far away someone else's satellite is from your satellite. And nowadays, to clear space debris, you have satellites with grappling arms that can get hold of a satellite. Other ways is to attack satellites by dazzling them and burning out their electrics. And we don't have the laws for this. And I think we urgently need them. We don't have the laws about the moon. Everyone agrees in theory that no one country can own territory out there. But the reality is, and this is with the Artemis Accords, the American-led Artemis Accords, they're going back in 2025, they're going to land a man and a woman on the moon. And by 2032, they want a moon base there. And they want the minerals, and so does everybody else. So by what law, if they have, as they have in the Artemis Accords, Article 11, a self-declared safety zone, by what law do you then say, well, you can't come and land anywhere near me. I spent all this money finding where the metals are. We're digging them up. There are no laws. And so we urgently need new space laws. Go to the last slide. This is a vision of the future. We can 3D print. We've already 3D printed tools, mechanical tools on the space station. We can 3D print a moon base. We will. We're going to do all these things, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And I'm very energized as a nerd about these things. But I do worry that the there's an arms race already going on up there. We've already, 4 countries have shot down one of their own satellites to test whether such a thing can be done. The Russians have test fired something, we're not sure what, from one of their satellites, which hit another one of their satellites. And as I said, we don't have the rules. Elon Musk is trying to make them. He said, one of his best lines actually said, I want to die on Mars, but just not on impact. He says he's going to have 1 million people there by 2050. I think that's fantasy. But the fact is that he will get there. SpaceX will get there. And if you were to subscribe to Starlink, his satellite system and his terminals for the internet, you actually sign in the terms and conditions that he and his company is in charge on Mars. That's forward thinking. We need laws. So there's so much more I could say, and there's so much more negative, but I'd like to end on some positive notes. The medical experiments that are already going on are fantastic. The potential for free, clean nuclear energy are there. Free, clean solar energy beamed back to Earth. It's all there. But the real thing we're going to do is what we've always done, and that's look to the high mountain, sail out into the ocean without even knowing what's on the other side of the ocean. That's the real impetus behind all this. And it's going to be Homo Spacian that finds it. And I'll leave you with a joke. I am told that my new book, if you read it in zero gravity, you just can't put it down.